Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. Very grateful to that and grateful to all the people who helped me. The purpose of these podcasts, as I always say, is to go deeper into the history, the spirituality, and in this case, the psychology that lies behind the 12-step recovery path. And if you like what you're hearing, please be sure to hit the subscribe button, do the like if it's on your thing, and most of all, tell a friend. And if you are able, donations really help us keep this thing going. So whatever you're able to do, please send it along. Gratefully appreciate it. This is the second episode we're doing now in a series focused on a book by a Jungian analyst, Dr. Jim Hollis. The book is titled Living Between Worlds, Finding Personal Resilience in Changing Times. And there's a link to it in the show notes. And in this episode, we can focus on Chapter 2, and it's here that Hollis describes what life is like living between two worlds. When one world ends, and another, a new world, a different world, hasn't quite come into view. And as I said last time, I think this is very apt in describing what happens to us in addiction when the alcohol or the drug world that was so familiar to us, that we lived in, that we got our identity from, maybe we lived there for years, and it suddenly collapses for one reason or another, and we're thrust into a new world. We call it recovery, but we're not really at home there either. The old world goes, and the new world hasn't quite come into focus. That's what his book is really about, and it's quite spiritual and depth psychological. I guess that's a word. It's depth psychology that he's kind of leaning into here. And so what is true for us as addicts, this change that we go through, I think it's also happening in a broader context, in the collective context, to the culture, the society that we live in. The old securities, particularly the function of religion, is no longer holding. That center that provided our ancestors with a sense of who they were, It answered many of their questions, why they were here, where they were going. It was kind of a nice container. And that container sort of busted loose, but that center is now lost to many, many people. And it doesn't look like it's coming back anytime soon. Jung was faced with that. He had to find a way to live, and he approached it with what he called analytical psychology, depth psychology. And psychology is what? It comes from the meaning of soul. And he took soul seriously. And what he eventually evolved to was that people today are faced with a sickness of the soul, that the soul hasn't found its home, and that many of the old institutions that are trying to make it home, well, they're not working. That's what he's about. He's not anti-religion. He says, if the religious structure works for you, really meets your needs, go for it, by all means. He once said in one of his writings, a member of the Oxford group came to him. It wasn't Roland Hazard. I don't know who it was, but he says, you are a member of the Oxford group. You should go to Jesus. I can't do it better than Jesus, But for people for whom the religious approach doesn't work, that was what he was trying to develop for them. And I think subsequent authors and Jungian psychologists and such, they've tried to put those two together in some ways that maybe it's not so black and white. You got to go this way, you got to go that way. So anyway, that's what Hollis is about. And he argues this lack of connection to the divine. It causes a huge amount of anxiety, even if we are unaware of its depth and how it really is affecting us on the inside, maybe at an unconscious level that we are feeling disconnected, purposeless, that life is without meaning. And that's only exaggerated in the case of an alcoholic or an addict who comes into recovery and then is told, well, you're going to have to recover by spiritual principles. I had a sponsor who described for me, he said, Bill, we do have a leg up on the normal people. It's like we have an anvil hanging over our heads. And if we don't get a hold of what spirituality is all about, what it means, how you connect with it, that anvil is going to fall right on our skulls. All right? So it's a help. It's a help. But it does require an open mind. And it does require, in some cases, certainly in my case and in many, it's going inside to find that which we are in search of. Hollis quoted Nietzsche in the last episode, and he said not only that God is dead, but that we killed him. And I take that seriously in the sense of where the AA program comes to play. We had to quit playing God. It was as if we took over the place of God. And as a result of that, we've lost conscious contact with what Jung refers to as the God image, because it no longer seems viable. So how do we find that God image? How do we connect with it as modern people in the modern world? And Hollis starts off his chapter with a quote from Jung. And he writes this: any uncertainty about the God image causes a profound uneasiness in the self, for which reason the question is generally ignored because of its painfulness. But that does not mean it remains unasked in the unconscious. What is more, it is answered by views and beliefs like materialism, atheism, and similar substitutes which spread like epidemics. We got a sick society that we're living in, and we as addicts need to find a solution to that. How do we live life and live it successfully without the buttressing of alcohol and drugs and all that other stuff? So Hollis continues. So then, where are we today? Something has ended? We are between metaphors, those images that mobilize our resources, that give us a sense of purpose, direction, and momentum, energy. The crises of our time are, for the most parts of the world, not those that troubled and destroyed our ancestors. Despite the horrific bloodshed of World Wars I and II, he says, this is Jung, the great destructions of famine, plague, and war have largely been contained in most parts of the world. Correction, this is not Jung, this is Hollis speaking. So he says, despite the horrific horrors of World War I and II, for most people, it's not war, it's not plague, it's not famine that we're struggling with. He says these are manageable problems if we're wise and disciplined in our approach to them. And I was struck by the use of the word manageable. These are manageable problems. I love that phrase because what it reminded me of is step one. Our lives had become unmanageable. And that's, I think, what gives us a leg up on the rest of the world. We, at some deep level, need to come to recognize the unmanageability of our lives. And I'm forever grateful the way I was taught by a set of sponsors that I had in early recovery. It was their take on step one that was unusual, but it's really served me very, very well over the years. And they said this to me. They said, Bill, you might understand 100% what it means to be powerless over alcohol. You might get that. But what it means when we say in the second half of that step that our lives had become unmanageable, the depth of that truth is so overwhelming. It's such a challenge and such a threat to the normal human ego that you'll never grasp that one 100%. And I think those guys were right. I know they were right, because I've been slowly swallowing that truth for almost 53 years now, that my life is unmanageable by me. All right? But that there is a power, there is an inner resource, an inner resilience, to use Hollis's description, that is present and that is ready and is willing to help. And as the big book says, God could and would if he were sought. That is what this second chapter is about. And it's not so much as finding the resource itself, as just kind of showing us what that new consciousness is really all about, and looking at the false gods, let's say, that we've looked to in our lives to try to fulfill the hole in our souls, the emptiness, the vacuum that is inside of us. And that hasn't worked, all right? Maybe in times of crisis, when it's obvious to me that I can't manage my life, when my problems are so overwhelming that I know I need help and I know I need it desperately. Maybe those are the times in my life when I'm actually most sane, most in touch with reality, or as we say in the program, I'm reaching out for that great reality, capital G, capital R, that is within. Okay? But how about when things are going well? Do I have the same attitude? Am I still calling out for help? Am I looking for guidance? Or am I thinking, hey, my life is looking pretty damn manageable right now. I guess I'm doing okay. Thank you, God. Off I go, I lose sight of my need for guidance, for going inside, for watching myself, and for connecting with that which is deeper within. And that which is deeper within is a mystery. And that is the word Hollis is going to reference in this chapter. That we've lost the connection to mystery. And we've substituted for it any number of things in an effort to control. All right? Hope that is kind of making some sense. Hollis is asking, is this really the case? Are things really going well at that time, or am I just whistling in the dark? Am I in touch with that greater reality, and am I living in alignment with it? Or is the higher power just a pinch hitter, as the AA literature says, that gets called in from time to time when things get rough? It's those times that Hollis is going to examine in this chapter. But he takes a deep look under the hood, and he asks, how well are we managing our fears? How well are we managing our anxieties? And, in Jungian therapy, they have a technique called amplification. I think some of my early sponsors, I know they studied some Jung stuff. And I would say, well, I'm feeling a little anxious. And they would amplify that. They'd say, you mean you're terrified? Well, I didn't want to say that. But, now that you mention it, there is a terror that is at work inside of me. And when I lose my way, when I lose my connection to this power that's greater than me, this inner reality, this mystery, when I lose conscious contact with it, communication with it, I sense a fear coming into my life. I'll give those guys credit if I really look at it. There's some terror there. There's some terror going on. How well am I doing? This is the stuff we're going to try to get to here. It's not easy. I know it's not easy. And we want to avoid it, But at least for these 30, 40 minutes, we're going to kind of meet it head on, I hope, eh? Those anxieties within us, they don't disappear just because we're not looking at them or even when we're not aware of them. That under the surface of our lives, at the level of the unconscious, they're still there. And they're still going strong. And they're still affecting us in ways of which we're not aware. And this is why step 10, I think, is extremely important. And I don't think it's a checklist. 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I feeling this? Am I feeling that? Okay, I guess I'm okay. Watch yourself. Watch for the anxiety. Feel for the anxiety. Don't be so quick to run away from it. All right? Let's get into this. That's where we're going. So this chapter lists a number of ways that we try our very best to keep from looking, to keep from feeling the anxiety that comes when we've lost that living connection to the divine. One mystic, I've quoted him before, Thomas Kelly, called it the beyond that is within. I mean, we have a spiritual component to us that my little golden retriever doesn't seem to have, or if she has it, and perhaps she does, she's not in conflict with it, It's just kind of coursing through her. So what are these defense mechanisms that we come up with so that we don't have to go within and look at ourselves and feel some of this terror when the ego has taken control and is actually in charge and playing God at some level of internal life, eh? We don't announce to the world, I'm playing God today. But if you look at your behaviors, if you look at what's going on inside, under the hood, that's exactly what I'm doing. This is the way the world should be. This is what should be happening now. These 6 red lights that I've just faced, driving to work, they shouldn't be there, and I'm angry as hell. All right. So the first one, he says, is materialism. If I don't have access to a religious function, a spiritual connection, I'm going to go shopping. Go buy some stuff. Let me quote him. I think it's a nice paragraph that he put in here. He says, "We all know we have the comforts of shopping, the urgent distraction of connecting with, quote, the other, that for many, in fact, offers the momentary delusion of connection to something that matters. All right, can't find God, but maybe I can find Nordstrom's or Costco or go buy something. End this anxiety." It says, just witness the feeding frenzy of Black Friday, gleefully filmed by television stations each holiday shopping season. The lusting faces, the anticipation, the frenetic rush, the pushing aside of neighbors, the orgasmic bliss when one walks out holding a flat-screen TV. If we were to flash forward a week later, would we wonder how many found their melancholia comforted by that electronic object before them, or how many are still dealing with heartache, anxiety, and loss, despite acquiring, after long waits in line, the latest electronic gizmo? Hollis continues, I'm not criticizing these purchases, as I own some of these items myself. Rather, I empathize with the sad letdown that inevitably occurs when we ask more of the other, whether person or object, than the other can ever provide. What then, he asks. What about my soul? I cheated it. I went in search of something that I thought could fulfill, but in the end, I feel cheated. In materialism, which is what he described in that paragraph, we look to things which we believe are going to satisfy our deepest longings. But of course, they never do in the end because there's never enough. I worked with a guy once who was chasing millions, all right? He had millions. He was quite wealthy. But he was restless, irritable, discontent, feeling that there wasn't enough millions. If he could just have a few more millions, then he'd be okay inside. Not true. Not true. You know? You look at the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. You know, he had his money. Let's say he had his millions. But inside he was empty. You know? And the ghosts of Christmas past were going to have to come and visit him under the hood. Under the hood. And he was getting set up for what? For a change. For a psychic change. And this is what Jung believed in. Don't forget what he told his patient who failed to get from his first treatment with Jung what he needed. That story's in the big book, and it's so important. Jung says, I tried giving you everything that psychiatry had to offer, and it wasn't enough for you. You needed something more. You needed a psychic change. Could have said the same thing to Scrooge. I could have given you more wealth, more luxury, whatever. But that's not what's going to fill the hole in your soul. What's going to fill that puppy is something deeply spiritual. And you've got to find your connection to it. You got to find a psychic change, a spiritual experience, an awakening, if you will. And that's what the 12-step deal is all about. It's not about not drinking. Not drinking comes as a side consequence of this deal. The goal, the aim, is the psychic change. It's the spiritual awakening or experience that we're aiming for in step 12. So that's the materialistic things, looking for it in object. But you can also look for it in people, in codependency. We look to that other person who we believe is going to satisfy our deepest desires. It's very immature, but we're all there, you know? So we look to him or we look to her to give what I refuse to go searching for deep inside myself. You know? And that's where we have to go to find it. Big Book says, in the end, it's the only place that we are going to find it and relate to it. And that's the journey. That's the spiritual journey. Another technique that we use to hide from our true selves, from going on this journey, he says, is diversion. Just stay busy, perpetually busy, always busy. Watch TV. Watch it endlessly. Look to our phones. Look to the latest gizmo. And do it mindlessly. Here's what Hollis writes. Diversion has become a modern treatment plan for all that afflicts us. But from what are we diverting, one asks. The answer varies from person to person, but it is safe to say that we seek distraction from the terrible longing the soul feels for connection with the mystery of being here. He adds, the erosion of tribal images, linking people to those mysteries, is the great anguish of the modern world. So stay busy. Don't stop. I've started watching couples in a restaurant. They sit down and immediately, rather than connect with one another, out come their phones. It's avoidance. It's avoidance. I don't want to connect. I don't want to join. That's too scary for me today. I don't know how to do it. So I'm diverting my soul from meaningful relationship and staying in conscious contact with my social people at a very superficial level, let's say. Some other techniques for avoidance, hey? And this is the one that those of us in AA, NACA, whatever A, is hiding within our drug of choice. Hollis writes, drugs and alcohol have been with us for millennia. When things get difficult, we get stoned. We drink until we feel no pain. Yet these efforts tend to awaken the same old pain while generating new levels of discord. Try to hide from the pain, but in the end, the pain gets worse. We also often turn to food, he says, as our treatment plan. Who does not project the need for the primal nutrient source onto food? Listen to that. The primal nutrient source. I'm looking to be fed from life. You know, we're not talking physical hunger. We're talking emotional hunger. We're talking spiritual hunger. That's what I'm looking for, eh? But I turn it to food. So he calls it the staff of life, the necessary daily bread. And then he has a sentence here which we need to pay attention to. He says, all addictions are anxiety management systems. We have developed ways to cope with our fears, ways to deal with our anxiety, our terrors, if you will. Eh? He says they all work to a small degree. Otherwise, we would not offer them so much committed energy as we do. And when none of these truly work, there's always the referred anger, the sense of betrayal that something was stolen from us, and we call this, he says, righteous violence. How energizing and distracting it is to be angry, to be full of bloodlust, piled onto sensation, creating a culture. We've created a culture of violence. And it's in due proportion, he says, to the experience of the violence done to our souls. You can take away the guns. You can try to control this stuff in different ways, and I suspect it's probably a good idea that we do, but it doesn't get to the cause. You know, none of these things get to the cause. And the cause is separation. The cause is isolation. The cause is disconnection from the divine. I've mentioned this before. In Jewish mythology, they say in heaven, when a human being walks by, all of the angels are supposed to bow. Why? Because the angels only have to deal with their spirits. You know, we have to deal with the physical and the spiritual. We are composed of, we're very complicated beings. My God, we're complicated. And we've got this outside and this inside. And for a good number of years in my life, I wasn't even aware of the inside. I was covering up the inside, covered it up with food, covered it up with alcohol, covered it up with drugs and with work. You know, I am what I do until I couldn't do it anymore. And then that's when this stuff becomes real. Who the hell am I? Who am I? And what I hope you don't get stuck with, you know, because what we say in recovery, well, my name is Bill and I'm an alcoholic. Well, that is true. And that can maybe help cut through the denial, and that's good. But after a time, I hope to God you're more than just an alcoholic, because you are. I hope you're more than just a drug addict, because you are. All right? I hope you're more than just a lost codependent, because you're never going to find it in that other person. It's inside. Recovery is an inside job. And that's where we have to go. And some of us would do everything and anything on earth rather than to go there. So Hollis says the two final techniques for avoiding going inside and becoming rightly related to the mystery within. And these, he says, are scientism, putting our faith in science. Wilson talks about this in the big book. Science was my God, almost. I believed in science. I trusted in science. Says he still does, except it's not his God anymore. He's gotten in touch with that mystery that even underlies science. I've been reading a number of books by scientists who are maybe more spiritual than many people who are not scientific at all. Anyway, scientism, that's one. And the other is religious fundamentalism. And he calls these the new mythologies, the substitute, making science our God. We're becoming religious fanatics. Or I might add, this is where I get into trouble, but you can do the same damn thing with AA or NA or CA or NEA. It can become your God. And that's not going to be satisfying, you know? I kind of stopped the spiritual search for about 20 years in recovery. I was a good little AA boy, you know, doing my little AA thing. But I'm telling you, it wasn't enough for me. Something was rattling inside. It was time to go on an enhanced spiritual journey, you know? I mean, I'm grateful to AA, still with it, still love it, still know it saved my life and saved the lives of millions of other people. But it is an ongoing journey, and I meet any number of people who have stopped short. Same thing is true in church. Many people who have stopped short of the spiritual growth, all right? And then they become what? Rigid. They become limited. They've lost contact with, or they've never even found that great mystery that is within. Let me quote Hollis again. He's kind of summarizing Jung here. Jung concluded that there was within each of us a deep resilience guided by some locus of knowing, some center of awareness, independent of ego consciousness, a center that produces our dreams to correct us, symptoms to challenge us, visions to inspire us. And I'm going to put that quote in the show notes because I think it's really worth meditating on, going deep into. I'm going to try to go beneath the surface of it, break it down into its component parts. Because I think that sentence, it's just one sentence, it's loaded. And I think it points us towards the real solution. I'm going to read it again. Jung concluded that there was within each of us a deep resilience, guided by some locus of knowing, independent of ego consciousness, a center that produces our dreams to correct us, symptoms to challenge us, visions to inspire us. First, there is within each of us a deep resilience. We have the capacity to change, and it can happen on a dime, or it can take years. But the capacity for transformation is part of what it means to be a human being. We don't have to be the same person. And particularly for those of us who burned it out in the first half of life, Oh, there's gotta be more than this. Boom. That's what really, really makes us ready for a new self. It's in us, is what he's saying. It's there and it's waiting for us to bring it to life. So we're not hopeless. See, that's the message of step one. I'm absolutely convinced of that. The message of step one is hopelessness. You're hopeless. All right? And the message of step two is what? Hope. Hopeless to hope. And that's why he says, watch for being in between those two. The person who's hopeless, you give him any or her any shot at hope, and they're there. But it's when you're in between. Not so hopeless. Not much hope. That's the in-between place that his book is geared towards. So we're not hopeless, but it may be necessary for us to feel that way at first. Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat dies, it remains but a grain of wheat. Well, alcoholics and addicts, we damn near die, and we do die. And we die over and over and over again. To what? To an old self on our way to a new self. Good news is we don't have to do this ourselves. This is the next part of his sentence. We each have an inner guide. He calls it some locus, some center of knowing. And it's independent, he says, of ego consciousness. Now, it took me a long time to understand what the hell this is all about. What Jungian psychology is saying, and I think what mystics have always said in different language, is that there are two selves. And the one is the ego. I'm giving you the psychological part here. The one is the ego mind, and it's left brain. It's very helpful for doing your taxes, for driving a car. It's not a bad thing, this ego. It's your sense of who you are. But he says there's something more. That I'm not just this 3-pound brain. There's more to me than that. What is it? I'm not sure. But it is within me. It isn't out there, it's within. It grabs my attention from time to time. I've told my story a few times here, but I was studying to be a Jesuit priest. I was 27 years old at the time. Had been in AA and dropped out, and then I'm drunk again. And my life is going to hell, and all the stuff is about to hit the fan. I was going to get in big trouble. I could see it on the wall. And I had a thought, two thoughts, actually. One was I was just going to say, the hell with it. I'm going to go on another geographical cure and go to Australia and just stay drunk for the rest of my life. Now, that was thought A. And thought B was, well, maybe we give it one more shot. I'm going to leave these guys, move over to India, join an ashram, and become holy as hell. And those were the two insanities, let's say, that were going on inside me. And it was at that point that I heard a voice. It took me years to understand that this is what Jung was talking about, that there exists within each of us some locus, some center of knowing, independent of ego consciousness. All right? And that spoke to me at that moment. And it said, Bill, you are 27. If those are your two choices, there is something wrong with you. That was an intervention in my life by a voice that was not my ego's voice. I knew it wasn't my ego's voice. I know what my thinking sounds like in my head. This was not that. This was something separate from me. People have visions. people have psychic experiences, all right, wherein their normal consciousness is quieted and something other than, different than, separate from, steps in and takes charge. Wilson had this. Wilson had it. His was a very positive one. He was on a mountaintop. He had a vision and a spirit, not of air, not of wind, was blowing through his soul. Altered state of consciousness. And he knew as a result of that he was a changed person. That something had shifted deep, deep, deep inside. And what the book says is this can happen to us sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But it will happen, if we take certain steps. And what the steps are there to do, not just to get us to quit drinking. The steps are there to alter our consciousness, to allow us access to this deeper part of self, all right? God isn't out there. I went looking out there all my young life. Not there. Not there. God's looking for me. Totally 180 turn. Stop looking for God. God's looking for us. And he's looking for us to allow him or her or it, whatever you want to call it, to enter into our consciousness, to raise our consciousness. That's what the recovery journey is all about. And you give that to people, and there comes an excitement to 12-step recovery. If you just give them, you're not going to drink, and you're going to quote slogans, and you're just going to read this one book over and over and over and over again, that's a little bit of death. And a lot of people are not going to settle for that. And I hope you won't settle for that, because you're entitled to more. But it's going to take going inside, and it's going to take some real changes. So this thing is independent of our consciousness, right? And maybe I hope I'm right on this, is that this is where two-way prayer really comes into play. That it has something to offer that has been lost, because it links us directly to this voice within, this mystery within, all right, this God image, if you will, that is within. It connects us, joins us to the divine light. Call it what you want, huh? But it brings about a personal experience of the presence and the power as that presence and power reveals itself, manifests itself in us, and guides us. Hollis says we can be guided by some locus of knowing that's independent of ego consciousness. And this is what got lost when AAs left the Oxford group and became independent. Wilson, he hints at it, his 11th step, but he also obfuscates it, hides it somewhat. But I tell you, when I discovered two-way prayer, and I saw it was all over early AA, pioneer AA, then it came to life. The program came to life, and I came to new life. I came to new life in recovery. That which was getting bored and stale within me, suddenly it started to take off. I started to take off. Why? Because that which was within was finally finding expression in my life. And I was rightly related to that a hell of a lot more than I ever had been before. But listen to the words from the big book, eh? And see if this isn't exactly what they're talking about. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane. It's not ego consciousness. It's an experience of the divine within. What used to be the hunch or occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. This alternate center is now finding expression through my thoughts in my life, particularly in my morning quiet time. Our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. The inner voice, the inner guide, Hollis says, it is independent of the ego. And what he means is the ego is not gone, but it is now finally rightly related to this higher self. And that's the spiritual journey that we are invited to travel. So let me close with a paragraph from Hollis's second chapter that might help pull some of this together. He writes this: so we all have both personal and social services to do in the healing of our time. God has a plan for us. We're a part of that plan. As a matter of fact, it's unique to us. I got in touch, I think it may about 20 years ago, that my function was to do all I could to get two-way prayer out to more of you guys. As I'd been stuck in treatment, I was running a treatment center, and I didn't have the time to really devote to this thing. But since I retired, it was, okay, here's your job, here's your assignment, if you choose to accept it. Mission impossible. Your job is to bring two-way prayer to people in 12-step recovery and help them take a second look at the four absolutes. There was always that little addendum there. Take another look at the four absolutes: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. You want to listen to the voice of God? That's how you know you're listening to it. We're coming pretty damn close if you're not. Is this thought honest? Is it pure? Is it unselfish? Is it loving? You know, those become the four standards that we use in guiding us through the day and in making big decisions. But I digress. So let me go back. So we all have both personal and social service to do in the healing of our time. Children must be comforted. Classes must be held. Hospitals must open their doors. Police direct traffic. Teachers teach, and so on. And we might add, and there are alcoholics and addicts who must be helped and given hope. How? Through our love and service. He goes on, the world does depend on each of us showing up as often as we can, as best as we can. The gift of depth psychology, he says, is that it may help us find our way to our own locus of knowing, inner voice, and give us a compass, guidance, to chart our way. I'd hoped to get through 2 chapters, but I thought this was some heavy stuff, some deep stuff, but some stuff that was worth spending some time with. I really like Hollis. He's got a number of YouTube videos. I'd encourage you, James Hollis, Hollis, look up some of them. Very big on the midlife crisis or the midlife passage, what this change is all about. He's in his 80s now. He's still around, and I hope he's around for another 80 years more. I got a lot to learn from this guy. In the next episode, we're going to take another deep look at what is it that depth psychology is all about, what does it have to offer, and why does it matter? So I hope you'll come back for that. And I hope this information, I know it's deep stuff, but what the hell? Cars, you got to look under the hood. If you just turn on the ignition and off they go and don't think about it, well, that's nice. But sometimes they break down. I broke down. My guess is many of you guys broke down too. And we got to understand how we get these motors of ours up, running, and going in the right direction. Again, I put a link to his book. It's in the show notes. Also put a link there to my own book, just got published on two-way prayer, and I hope you'll find that of interest. If you do, I'd really encourage you to do me a big favor and write a review of it, but only if you like it. Write a review and put it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, wherever you bought the book, and let people know it's safe reading. So thank you for listening. God bless, and please keep coming back.